Bam. All right, welcome everybody to class today. What we're going over is our two very important lectures. So luckily, actually, it's kind of handy that we're doing this online because I get a lot of questions on project completion that ultimately ends up being just this lecture. So you guys can watch this over and over if you desire. Let me move this, try to get my little face up there so you can see me. All right, so International Routes and Track Systems has a cool video. It's fascinating stuff. Basically shows how busy the airspace is out there, except for right now. Not too busy right now. But today, this is what we're discussing. Track systems. In your project number 2, which you have just received, and in actual class I would have given you a packet, there will be some information on routes and tracks. You do not have a formal track, so you're not on a NATS track, but I'm going to mention all the different types of tracks from over the Atlantic, over the Pacific, and if you're making background noise in your mic, this is the time to mute it because I'm going to get into talking and I'm much ADD to pay attention to background noise and you guys. So let's just launch into it. There's charted and non-charted types of tracks, and I'll show you pictures of them all so that you can see what they are. And I'm sure, Sean, your dad has probably flown all of these. He can probably talk to this almost more intelligently than I can. I never actually flew a NAT track because I was flying so low that it was sort of an NA for us. I flew random routes only. And that was something that I got to decide on my own based on the weather analysis and whatever my commander wanted me to do. So the difference between a fixed track and a non-charted track is pretty obvious. Fixed tracks are actually on the plotting chart. Your company will give you a plotting chart. So say you work for American Airlines and you're going to fly international. They hand you the charts and your track is actually going to be pre-printed on it, which is very handy. Non-charted tracks are not. And typically you'll see the non-charted tracks really on both sides of the ocean, some in the Atlantic, some in the Pacific. It's sort of company specific and mission specific and flight specific, whether or not you do a charted or non-charted track. Sometimes it's even seasonal. Welcome to all of you joining us. That's what the ding is, by the way, in the background is people joining us. So hi, thank you for coming. I've already gotten started, but no worries. This is all recorded and I'll post the entire YouTube channel. By the way, if you're looking at my chats to everyone, I have sent out a link and that should be my entire YouTube channel for AS350. So go give those a look if you missed class. So charted or fixed tracks are going to be printed. Like I said, there's a NOPAC or North Pacific, and then there's these sort of jumping off points, the NCA and SCA. These are all links if you want to take a look at them, but the NCA and the SCA are just two control areas that feed into the NOPAC. So if you're going to Hawaii or you're going to Japan or you're going to Australia, first, if you're leaving from, say, Vancouver, you're going to go through the Northern or NCA. And if you're going from, say, San Diego, you would go through the SCA. You're going to get a clearance through both the SCA and then onto the NOPAC, and then probably have to read the clearance back for the entire route of flight. If you're going across the Arctic, which is pretty uncommon, but you'll see if anyone's sort of nerdy out there like me and wants to pull up, say, flight tracks for the day, and you can look at the flight tracker, there will be at least one flight a day from places like Mumbai to LAX. And they're actually going to go across the Arctic control area because the shortest route of flight will be over the pole. And then there's the polar regions, the polar track system or PTS, all charted and fixed tracks that never move. Between Hawaii and the west coast of the US is the West Atlantic route system, or WATRS for short. Like I said, these are, oops, I'm not going to open the link there. But you can take a look at them on your own if you have a curiosity. They do change from time to time when the charts are reprinted. So yes, they do flex slightly, but not nearly as much as the non-charted tracks. So this is the biggest one for most companies. If you're going to fly over the North Atlantic, you're going to usually fly on a NATS track. Ironically, our flight is sort of a random route, the one that I've given you in the project, but typically you're going to fly on the NATS track, or the OTS, sort of known as the same thing. Two different acronyms for the same thing, not confusing at all, right? But they're flex, and they're published as a sort of NOTAM. It's like a track NOTAM, and I'll show you a picture of it on the next slide, I think. In, let's see, the North Pacific NOPAC system, between Japan and Hawaii, there's flex tracks. So favorable winds. You know how the jet streams shift from season to season, so they do change those. And then random tracks are what I flew over the ocean, because no one really cares where C-130 flies, because we're flying at, if we're loaded down, we're flying at 20,000 feet. You need to see what I'm saying? Like, no one flies that low over the ocean except for us. So ATC, just basically they clear your direct wherever you want to go at those altitudes. Now, if you're in the really busy airspace up high in, say, RVSM airspace between 290 and 410, ATC is much more rigorous about slotting you, giving you tracks, things like that. So random tracks are easy in a way and hard in a way, because the burden of planning is on the crew or the dispatcher. Random and flex are not synonymous, so let's go back. Again, flex tracks, they're flexible and they change daily, but they're published. That's the difference. A random track is something you just decide, hey, I want to go to West 40, North 20, and then we're going to turn and go to X point. So if you're not considering wind, great circle routes are ideal. You just choose that route. Most of the time, I would choose my random route with my crew and my commander based on A, what we needed to go pick up. So if somebody had, say, a base, the base in Lodges needed us to deliver something, we would go down south, which I'll show you a picture of Lodges in a bit. You actually have Lodges, which is in the Azores, on your charts. So let's see, charts are used for oceanic flights. Straight line is a great circle. This should not be unfamiliar to you. Your lines of latitude do curve noticeably. And then, of course, except for the equator, the center of all parallels do not lie at the center of the Earth. So why are they segmented by waypoints? This is sort of a history lesson, but any type of navigational error, if you didn't have any way, so technically speaking, in the newest A330 or Dreamliner or whatever, you could take off out of Philadelphia, get cleared direct to London Heathrow, and you'd probably be just fine. So this may become a thing of the past when we get satellite navigation over the oceans, but right now they're segmented by waypoints. You have to turn at each waypoint, or if you're going straight across the ocean like we are, you pretty much fly the Great Circle route. But back in the day, and still to this day, aircrew need to detect navigational errors in a timely manner. And it's much harder if you took off out of Philly and you have no waypoints in between Philly and Heathrow. So any variation will alert the pilots and the controller to possible deviations or navigational inaccuracy. If there's unforecast winds and you haven't corrected for that, or your autopilot hasn't corrected for that, you'll find out when you hit the point and you go, wait, where are we? So nothing worse that I can imagine than being lost over the ocean, seriously, and running out of fuel. So oceanic controllers, they're actually plotting your progress. Now I'm sure these days the oceanic controllers are sitting at a desk with a computer in front of them plotting you electronically. Back in the day, even just a decade ago when I was flying, those oceanic controllers were physically plotting you and everyone else around you on a piece of paper, on a chart. I know, it seems far-fetched, but it's true. In most track systems, you basically get 10 to 15 minutes nose to tail, and that's how they separate you. So obviously don't get fast or slow. You are gonna be assigned to an airspeed, a Mach speed, and so is everybody else. And so in RVSM airspace specifically, you're going to set that Mach speed, and you're not going to touch it, and you're not going to deviate from that, because you will run into someone. Especially in that airspace, it's very, very busy. So as you report your waypoint passage, which is a really big deal, in fact, you can get violated and fired if you don't report waypoint passage and say you're asleep or you're too busy eating your flight lunch or watching your DVDs. Reporting waypoint passage plus or minus 3 minutes is absolute mandatory requirement for pilots. So once upon a time when I was flying over the ocean, you basically, I mean, everybody gets kind of keyed up. Shut up, everybody, shut up. My waypoint's coming up. I need to make my position report. And then you sit and you say it to yourself a couple times. Then you key the mic, you're being recorded, and you're actually being timed to the second on when you passed the waypoint and when you reported the waypoint. So very, very important that your voice comes across, reports the waypoint on time, plus or minus 3 minutes. In contrast, also an important question on your projects and in your AT chart homework, I can help you with a homework question. So you, the pilot, are meant to report each waypoint over the ocean. Say we're at a lat long, 30 west, 20 north. I just made that up. We report that waypoint plus or minus 3 minutes from the point when we hit it. But if our aircraft is going to deviate, this is a contrast. Say we're deviating by 2 minutes. Say we're going to get there more than 2 minutes early for whatever reason. Great tailwind. Even though we've set the required Mach speed, we're going to get there 2 minutes early. That's when we have to make a report to ATC. So that can happen at any point in the flight. If we realize we're going to be early, we make the report to ATC. We make sure they're aware that we're going to be early or late by 2 minutes. Okay? Keep your eyes open, watch at night, watch during the day for contrails, and of course ADS-B and TCAS are your friend. Some of you will write me papers and jet systems on ADS-B and TCAS, and that's actually a great topic. Anyway, a track, excuse me, a track has an entry point. Now this is just a defined track, so we're talking the ones that are published. Has an entry point. It'll probably be a named waypoint like Connie, and then the designation of the route written, and then an exit point at the end. And the exit point basically is where you come into VHF contact with the controllers on the other side of the ocean. So all along a track route where you're designated the route, you're really not in control, you're not under ATC control or radar control. You're responsible for making those waypoint passage reports, plus or minus 3 minutes again. And then at the exit point, you get, usually at that point, you're under radar control. So the waypoints along the track may not appear in the filing message, but it'll be included in the dispatch release. Okay, I'll give you some examples in a bit. Route definition, so you give lat long, so 55 north, 30 west. That's how you read it off. In my case, it would be, my deployment call sign was always Chrome 21, so that's always what I go back to. Chrome 21 passing 55 north, 030 west at 0251 Zulu. Next waypoint, 54 north, 040 west at 0315 Zulu, and you say it very clearly. And so you say where you're at and what your next waypoint is and the time you'll reach that next waypoint. And that's exactly how they're tracking you over the ocean. Crazy, right? So over the North Atlantic, the organized track system uses 10-degree increments of longitude. So you're going to hit 50, 40, 30, and 20. And 30 is your mid-ocean line and the fur boundary between Gander and Shanway. You have your NAP chart, pull it open right now and take a look. That 30 west will be a big green line straight through the middle. In class, I'd make you pull it out right now, so take a look. You'll also notice that if you flip the chart on the other side in the South Atlantic, it's not the same midpoint. It's actually 40 west. So that's a real interesting gotcha for our Kahoot game later. When we play Kahoot for extra credit, I make you look at the South Atlantic versus the North Atlantic midpoint. So generally, if you're going to travel north or south, say you're traveling more of a diagonal across the ocean, you need to report every 5 degrees of latitude, as opposed to the 10 if you're going straight across east to west. And that's just basically for traffic deconfliction. There's 3 possible oceanic types of routing: the charted or no pack, the flex or pay codes, and the random or lat long. And this, of course, is over the, sorry, I'm covering up the title here, over North America, Asia, and West routes. Here you see a really blurry picture, for some reason it turned out blurry, of all the oceanic FIRS, which basically means for this entire region in this side, this all belongs to Oakland, this all belongs to Tahiti. It's national airspace in the air, I mean national borders in the air. Pay codes is a strange acronym, but that's what they use. Published daily as a NOTAM. North Pacific routes, notice something cute? Anyone notice what they spell out? N-O-P-A-C. Nipi, Omoto, Pazro, Akisu, and Cutie. They spell out NOPAC. Somebody had too much time on their hands. They were bored. So between Alaska and Japan, you'll have these fixed published routes on your chart. So keep in mind, you're going to get 3 air traffic control clearances. If you're, say, going from Phoenix, which very possible some of you will be flying a Phoenix to, say, Fiji or Sydney route. First, of course, you'll get your domestic US or Canada clearance. And then you're actually going to go to a different frequency for your oceanic clearance. And that's a very, very long clearance that you got to make sure you read back perfectly, or they're going to make you read the whole thing again. I've been known, even on a good read back, to take 25, 30 minutes to read back an oceanic clearance. And then once you get to domestic Europe, you're going to get cleared as filed, pretty much fly what you filed. Airspace controls, just so you know, we call them centers here, and once you get to the UK, for example, you're going to be calling it London Control. Same thing, just a different designation. In the oceanic airspace, you're going to refer to your controller as Gander Oceanic. And if you're speaking on HF, you're not actually talking to Gander Oceanic, you're talking to a relay. So it is an HF relay. Somebody takes that information, and then they pick up a phone and they actually call the oceanic controller. Very strange system, and it still works this way, believe it or not. But once you talk to that radio operator, they call the controller, say you need to deviate for weather, or you need to slow down, or for whatever reason, you're somebody's having a heart attack and you're diverting. Typically, you're going to tell them, and 5 minutes later, they're going to get back to you and say, Roger, cleared direct is filed, or clear direct, you know, however able. So there is a delay when you're working out over the ocean. CPDLC is something that's very important coming onto the scene, that basically, and I'm sure Sean Clavey, you said your dad flies internationally, right? He's
every day.
Every day. So I guarantee that pilot controller data link, or CPDLC, is the most important way he gets in touch with ATC. So he probably types in, hey, I need to deviate right 20 miles for thunderstorm avoidance. And right away they go back in. It's all, I think it's by satellite over the ocean. So that's much quicker than an HF relay like I had to use. Okay. Remember, there's no radar still to this day, 2020. We can track people on our phones, and they can tell, you know, traffic congestion based on people's GPS location, but we can't do this with phones. I mean, we can't do this with airplanes over the ocean. Crazy. When I was in the military, we had Inmarsat, and we had some ways to track satellite returns on airplanes, but we're still far behind in the airline industry. So the question is why? I don't know. Anyway, I've said this a couple times in this lecture, but I'm going to say it again. You've got to make ETAs by plus or minus 3 minutes, meaning you've got to report your you got to report your position over each waypoint that's on your flight plan plus or minus 3 minutes. Okay, here's this pretty video. I like the song. Tell me if it's too loud when it comes across. It's usually really loud. Come on. Nope. Just pretty. Nope, it's pausing itself. That's okay. Notice something really interesting. If you look at the ocean and the way the traffic is really concentrated up here over Gander and Shanwick. These are your two main oceanic control, I guess the thoroughfare through the ocean, the Atlantic Ocean. It's not super rare to see the New York Oceanic Control and Santa Maria have traffic, but this is like the highway of the sky. I mean, picture I-40 or I-10. This is the I-10 of the sky. Notice how there's more space between these right here. There's a little bit more space than what I'm going to show you in the future couple slides. This video was actually of the NATS tracks was actually created back in the day before they had 30 nautical mile separation. So what you're looking at is a 60 nautical mile separation over the ocean, which was back in the day the standard. Even when I was flying, that was the standard. So I like the North Atlantic Skies video. It's kind of pretty. And then you can see Reykjavik up here is also an oceanic control, but much less popular. So Gander is controlled by those Canadians in Newfoundland. Shanwick is a splice of Shannon and Prestwick, two different control stations. So Shanwick is not a place. When I was a co-pilot, I flew through this and I thought, you know what, for all my geography lessons in my life, I don't remember seeing a Shanwick. So stupid me, I thought I was talking to someone in this crazy, mysterious city called Shanwick. All right. Anyway, MNPS is now called HLA. Strange, but true. The old guys will know what is MNPS. In fact, you may fly with a pilot who still calls it MNPS. That's why I leave it on the slide. Now it's called high level airspace. So we're accommodating more traffic every single day. There's a lot of airplanes. Despite this whole coronavirus craziness, we're still going to have a lot of airplanes out there. When this all dies down, hopefully, knock on wood, you guys will all have jobs still. And this is basically, this high level airspace has allowed NAT planners to reduce lateral separation. So you have to have this MNPS or HLA certification. You can't just go out and fly 30 nautical mile separation at these airspeeds with these large jets without having approval for this. Not everybody can fly in the NAT HLA. It takes money, it takes extreme amounts of maintenance. I mean, only the major airlines can afford all the ins and the outs and the we call it, the certifications required to do this. So anyway, it became HLA in 2016, and shortly thereafter, there was what we call a DLM, or Data Link Mandate. So you have to have the ability to answer with Data Link or CPDLC. Okay, can't just go out there blind with just a radio. RVSM is something you guys should be familiar with. We've reduced it from 2,000 feet to 1,000 feet. So we're getting closer and tighter to other airplanes, but luckily the aircraft and the crews are getting better and better trained, and I guess autopilots are getting much better than the one I flew with. I actually in a C-130 was never authorized, even if I could get to flight level 290, which was rare, never authorized to fly an RVSM because my autopilot was from 1965 in the E model, and even though the Talon 2 could make the autopilot work for RVSM, we couldn't get that high. So anyway, this is reserved for usually Part 121 and 135 airlines. So what is lateral navigation? You gotta know basically what do I need to go fly this stuff? You have to have at least 2 fully serviceable LRNs, or lateral navigation systems. So an INS, or an inertial navigation system, which is a self-contained system, a GPS or GNSS, which practically every plane in the world has now. But back when this requirement was made, not everybody had a GPS, not even the airlines did. And then FMS has to have inputs from both IRS or GPS these days. Questions on that? Okay. So LRNs, desirable coupled to the autopilot. This is just your basic requirements for flying in this airspace. You gotta have an accurate clock. Nowadays, we all have GPS clocks, so they're all hacked to the main GPS clock and the atomic clock. You have to have a time check, and then separation is expressed, like I said, in 10 to 15 minutes, nose to tail clock minutes. Altimetry equipment, you have to have 2 independent ones. You can't just go out with one system. You cannot have, there's a lot of things that can be MEL, and you can still fly the airplane, but you can't take it into RVSM airspace. You have to have an alerting system. So if you're off altitude, it has to tell you. If your autopilot fails or disconnects, it's got to give you a chime or some sort of alert. And then you've got to have an automatic altitude control system. So autopilot, basically a mode C transponder, and then strangely the altimeters only have to agree plus or minus 200 feet. So what, anyone know who's not on mute? You guys have been awesomely quiet. But when you're sitting on the ground, what's your altimeter agreement regulation? Anyone know? From private pilot? Plus or minus what?
Private pilot or for instrument?
I guess it was instrument, yeah.
Plus 75
feet.
Yeah, so weirdly, this is just really weird. Your limit for RVSM airspace is actually wider than it is just to take off. So
Fun fact about the 75 rule is it doesn't exist anywhere in the FAR, it's only in the AIM. And it doesn't mention instruments specifically, it just says altimeters are considered unreliable if more than 75 feet off known elevation.
Interesting.
Just thought that was fun.
Yeah, if you think about it, say your altimeter, say I'm at 100 feet off, down, and you're at 100 feet off, up from the altitude that we're supposed to be at and assigned at. I guess in theory, that's more than the 75 feet that you had to have, but this is the RVSM requirements. Okay, if I was giving another test, I would totally put that on there. RMP level is, in case you guys haven't heard this, I feel like we did this already with PBN lecture, but this is basically your value that you can be off. So distance in nautical miles, RMP level for the ocean, the oceanic airspace, is way wider than for the terminal area. Obviously, if you're going to be at 30 nautical mile separation over the ocean, tighter tolerance than 60 nautical mile separation. But if you think about it, if you're off by 10 miles, say in, and the other guy is off by 10 miles closer to you, yeah, you're awfully close. So, and then special approaches, these are the ones that we're talking like precision turning approaches in terrain, things like that, usually 0.1. Okay. So anyway, let's switch gears and talk about NATs now. We're going to the Atlantic side. We already talked about the Pacific side. The three types are still pretty much standard: charted, non-charted, and random. You got the NATs, which are the charted and the organized track system, based on all these things. And then so this is actually really interesting, and I should have pointed it out when we were watching that pretty video, that peak westbound traffic is from about 1130 to 1900. There's no law against flying the wrong direction, but it will be harder to get an oceanic clearance. And then peak eastbound traffic, 0100Z to 0800Z. So they basically put everyone over to land in the UK or in European airfields early in the morning. And then peak eastbound traffic is usually overnight. Okay. At OTS, again, it changes every 12 hours for traffic, and it'll actually give you a track NA if you're going the wrong direction at the wrong time. Oh, that 30 nautical miles as opposed to 60 is also known as RLAT, or reduced lateral, there it is, reduced lateral separation. Here's a picture of it. This is, basically you can file NATS West A, B, C, D, or E, depending on your dispatcher's choice. You may get this in your clearance. It'll be on your dispatch release, or you may get a 30 nautical mile separation. Obviously the crew and the aircraft have to be certified to do that. So there's the RLATs. Track messages. We're going to look at some track messages. They're issued, whoops, I can't see my own slides there. Consultation with airlines, New York, Reykjavik, all these control centers. And they're issued by Gander for nighttime going east and Shanwick for daytime going west. Okay, I already told you about my stupid co-pilot moment. Here is what it looks like. If you look at the old project that I used to give, my old international project had a NATS track. I'm kind of sad that we don't have a NATS track, but that's okay. We can live vicariously by the slide. Sorry, I know. So for example, east levels nil. That means you can't use the east levels. West levels, here's your altitudes that you can choose to file. Questions on any of this? Basically get, there you go, I can move that thing. Can you guys see this bar when I move it? Is that on your screen?
I don't see any bar.
You don't see any bar? Oh.
Yeah, I don't see anything.
It's my Zoom controls, and it's like right in the middle of my slides. But I moved it over. So you're still seeing my slides, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool, cool, cool. Okay, so anyway, this is just like a NOTAM. You can see that on the 14th day of this month at 2043, this was issued by this control agency. And then the tracks, it'll see NAT 1 to 3 tracks, FLS, etc. Okay, don't have much more to say about that, but you'll see that when you get to the airlines, you will eventually have one of these. New reduced lateral separation tracks. Notice where it says V Budar, so this will be a point, and then you get all your points across the ocean, and then Venner and Kokib, this is what your flight dispatch release will read, and these are the points that you're going to fly to. Also notice that it's a name like Budar and Venner on each side of the ocean. That's to designate a point that is actually radar, I guess, compatible, so you're going to be under radar control at Budar. And then by the time you get over the ocean, you're going to be flying lat longs under your own control, basically. And then Venner, they pick you up on radar. So it's just to give the pilots an idea where they can see you. And NAR and November 36 or 363 Alpha, et cetera, those are the NATS tracks that you file if you want to fly this route. All right. North Atlantic routes, I just talked about NARS. Here's what it looks like. This is a sort of a cheat sheet for your dispatcher. if, say, you want to fly this route, you pick Alex and you want to go to Karak, and this is the perfect route for you today because of winds and weather, then your NAR track code will be November 19 Bravo. So that's exactly, they just put this on your clearance, and then you've got this route of flight. It's almost like your FAA preferred routing is how it works over the ocean. Here's a good look at, say, you should recognize this chart. This is your plotting chart. This is what, some version of this is what your dispatchers are using to create your flight plan. Here's Connie. We actually have this on our route of flight. Connie starts there, and then if we were on a NATS track, we'd be on the November 51 Bravo. Okay. NATS entry and exit points, again, they're names, so they're spelled out with letters. And then you go over the ocean and you're not under radar control. So other types of chartered routes may be a little bit more obscure. Some of you will probably never see any of these in your life, but C-130s have been known to fly the island hop and the blue spruce because we can't make the altitudes and we don't have the legs for longer flights over the ocean. So this is for your people like little commuters, little cargo operations, and they can't fly those massive NATS tracks in RVSM airspace. Only one nav system is required, so sort of the poor man's way to hop across the ocean. This is what back in the day our forefathers used to get across the ocean. The blue spruce is here, you see Loach, and you go up and you basically stay as close to the ground as you can, stay as close to divert airfields as you can. And then island hops allow people to get back and forth to the, why am I blanking on the name of this island system? The Canaries, thank you. Okay. The polar routes, this is what they look like. I would give you an example chart in class, but we're not in class. So, and then, so random routes, the only requirement is that you make a position report every 10 degrees of longitude or 5 degrees of latitude if you're going north-south. So if you're cutting from, say, the tip of Florida to London Gatwick, you're going to make a position report every 5 degrees of latitude. I talked about the Mach number technique. Basically, they have no means to tell where you are except for longitudinal separation. So you got to remain at the Mach that you're assigned. Okay, that's basically all it says. Minor variations in speed, you're all flying through the same air mass, that's the theory. And then if change is needed, advise ATC as soon as possible, but the regulation on the chart, written on the Atlantic orientation chart says, if you're gonna deviate more than 2 minutes, you make sure you tell ATC. Just pictures, pretty pictures of tracks. It's insane how much traffic there is out there. I mean, they all look piled up on top of each other, and this is all satellite pictures. Okay. Questions on this? Anyone? I know what you're thinking. What are you going to have to do with the project? This lesson particularly is not as applicable to your project as the next one that I'm going to go over. Right now, what I'm going to do, because I need to separate these two lessons for your viewing pleasure, I'm going to stop my recording. I can figure out how to do it. There it is. Stop.